From Earth to the stars, China just did the unthinkable.
China has launched an unprecedented mission to retrieve samples from the far side of the moon.
China launched a rocket carrying 3 astronauts to the country's space station for a 6-month stay. It's the latest mission for China's rapidly growing space program, which American intelligence says is catching up to the U.S. Now, Beijing has set its sights on the moon.
Are we in a new space race?
We're in a space race. For us to go back to the moon, for them to get to the moon. I think we are in a space race with China.
In 2022, global spending on space programs hit a record $103 billion US, with the US accounting for about half of that spending. But China is catching up, having doubled their space spending in the past decade.
Their space station is actually quite advanced.
That's my concern about them getting to the South Pole before us, is they get there and they say, this is our territory, you stay out.
Imagine a universe where the stars are the battlegrounds of nations, where the conquest of space is the ultimate prize in a cosmic game of supremacy. Have you ever envisioned a scenario where a new superpower emerges from the shadows of the Earth, boldly claiming victory in the age-old space race? Can you grasp the magnitude of China's recent triumph as they soar past the United States and NASA to claim their place among the stars? Now, picture this. For decades, the United States has reigned supreme in the realm of space exploration, with NASA leading the charge in humanity's quest to conquer the cosmos. Could you believe that this era of American dominance has come to a dramatic end, eclipsed by China's meteoric rise to the forefront of space exploration? How did a nation once synonymous with the stars find itself left in the dust by an upstart challenger from the East? To answer that, let's embark on a journey beyond the bounds of Earth as we uncover the breathtaking saga of China's ascent to space supremacy. Buckle up for a cosmic adventure filled with heart-pounding thrills and jaw-dropping discoveries, where the boundaries of human achievement are pushed to their limits. Are you ready to witness history in the making as China boldly steps into the spotlight as the new leader of the spacefaring world? China is about to have the only fully functioning space station in orbit. Yeah, you heard me right. And when that happens, the US government might just kick themselves for a decision they made back in 2011. Let's dive into this cosmic drama, shall we? Back in 2011, the US decided to ban Chinese astronauts from the International Space Station, the ISS. They basically said, "Sorry, China, you're not invited to our space party." This move was like telling a kid they can't play in the neighborhood park. But instead of sulking, China went, "All right then, we'll build our own park." And guess what? They did just that. Fast forward to now, and China has launched the final module of its very own space station. Yep, they built an entire space station from scratch. It's like building a whole new house because you weren't allowed to crash on someone else's couch. Talk about determination. This bold move is a massive step in Beijing's quest to outshine the United States in space exploration. But what does this mean for the future of space? Well, let's break it down. With China taking the lead, we're looking at a whole new era of space missions. Imagine space as a big open field where everyone can explore, discover new things, and maybe even find life beyond Earth. But instead of working together, the US pushed China away. And now, China's got the biggest playground all to themselves. You might not know this, but one of the core principles of space exploration is teamwork. Scientists and astronauts from all over the world should ideally work together, share knowledge, and make amazing discoveries. But with this rift, the space game is changing. It's like a giant puzzle where one piece decides to create its own picture. For the last 70 years, the United States has been the big boss in space exploration. They led the charge to build the International Space Station, or ISS, a massive collaborative project that brought together the best minds from around the world. But here's the thing, the ISS is nearing the end of its life. By 2031, it's scheduled to be decommissioned and deorbited. That's right, guys. Our trusty space station will be taking a final bow and burning up in the atmosphere. Now, you might be wondering, why should we even care about space exploration? We've got enough problems here on Earth, right? Well, let me tell you, space exploration is way more important than you might think. Imagine a world without GPS. You'd probably get lost on your way to the grocery store. Or think about accurate weather predictions. Those storms and hurricanes would catch us completely off guard without the help of satellites. And let's not forget about solar cells powering our homes, or the ultraviolet filters in our cameras and sunglasses. All these everyday technologies came from our ventures into space. Space exploration isn't just about launching rockets and floating around in zero gravity. It's about making life on Earth better. And now, China is stepping up, ready to dominate the future of space. China's ambitious plans include not just their own space station, but also missions to the Moon and Mars. They're pouring resources and talent into space technology, aiming to become the new leader in the cosmos. Think about it. Whoever leads in space technology can shape the future. They can drive innovation, create new industries, and maybe even find solutions to some of Earth's biggest challenges. China's making a bold move to take that lead. Under President Xi Jinping, China's space dreams are on full throttle. They're not just building a space station. They're aiming to build a base on the Moon and plan to send astronauts to its surface by 2030. Talk about shooting for the stars. The Chinese space station, named Tiangong, which means Heavenly Palace, is set to make China the only country with its own space station. But there's a bigger story here, one that's all about how the US and China see global cooperation in space. China built its space station because they had to. For almost 20 years, China wanted to be part of the ISS team. But every time, the US government said, "Nope, sorry, not happening." In 2011, a bill called the Wolf Amendment, introduced by Republican Frank Wolf, put the final nail in the coffin. This bill stopped NASA from working with China on any space projects. The ISS is supposed to be an open and collaborative effort with countries from all over the world, but the US singled out China and said, "You can't join our space club." When asked why, the US government cited national security concerns and human rights issues. Now, using human rights as a reason to exclude a country isn't new for the US. But let's get real for a second. How does banning Chinese astronauts from the ISS improve human rights? Scientists just want to collaborate, share ideas, and make breakthroughs, no matter where they come from. Politics shouldn't get in the way of scientific progress. If human rights were really the measure for access to the ISS, Americans and more than half the world's astronauts would face the same scrutiny. Now let's contrast America's approach to China's. The US has been pretty clear about its strategy: contain China and keep them from advancing too quickly. Meanwhile, China has taken a different route. Even though China was shut out of the International Space Station, ISS, they didn't just sit and sulk. No, they rolled up their sleeves and built their own space station from scratch. It's like being told you can't play in someone else's treehouse, so you build a bigger, better one right next door. And here's the thing. China has said they're open to working with other countries on their new space station. They're essentially saying, hey, you didn't let us in, but we'll let you in.
国家这个一贯的主张就是，只要是坚持以这个和平利用太空为目的的，我们愿意与任何国家，或者是航天组织 进行合作和交流。
Back in 2015, space analyst Miles O'Brien mentioned on CNN that the idea of the U.S. teaming up with China in space gets shut down quickly in Congress. The fear is that China might swipe American tech secrets. On the flip side, Beijing's Ministry of Defense has always advocated for the peaceful use of outer space. This reflects a broader trend in American politics. Instead of focusing on strengthening themselves, U.S. leaders seem fixated on containing China. They've launched trade wars, targeted Chinese tech giant Huawei, and even imposed strict sanctions to cut off China's access to advanced microchips. It's like trying to keep your neighbor from renovating their house by throwing every obstacle in their path. But here's the big takeaway. When you push China into a corner, you don't weaken them. You make them more innovative and resilient. By trying to contain China, the U.S. might actually be pushing them to become smarter, faster, and stronger. Imagine telling a determined athlete they can't use the gym. They'll find a way to train harder and better somewhere else. So what we're seeing is a shift. While the U.S. tries to hold China back, China is using every setback as a springboard for greater innovation. It's a classic underdog story, and it's reshaping the future of space exploration. Meanwhile, the future of the International Space Station, ISS, is hanging by a thread. The partnerships and funding that have kept it afloat are running out. NASA is now in a race against time to keep the ISS operational, especially with China's space program making giant leaps forward. Originally, the ISS was supposed to be decommissioned in just 18 months. But in a bid to keep it alive, NASA told the Financial Times that, technically, the ISS can keep flying until the end of 2028. When you put the ISS side by side with China's Tiangong space station, the difference is striking. The ISS is like an old, cluttered attic compared to the sleek, modern Tiangong. The ISS has served us well, but it's starting to show its age. China is poised to gain a significant edge. Soon, any country wanting to send astronauts to a space station will have to knock on China's door. This shift in power is huge. For decades, the U.S. held this influence, deciding who could join them in space. Now, that power is slipping into China's hands.
China already landed a rover on the far side in 2019, the first country to do so.
Can you picture American astronauts docking at the Tiangong space station anytime soon? It's hard to say. One major hurdle for the U.S. in space exploration is politics. Over the past 18 years, the U.S. has changed its goals for crewed space missions multiple times, mostly depending on who's in the Oval Office. This is one downside of a two-party system like the U.S. has. Long-term planning is tough when each new president can change the course after an election. On the other hand, China has been consistently following its plans. They're now on their 14th five-year plan, and Beijing is firmly committed to landing astronauts on the moon by 2030. This consistency gives China a huge advantage in executing long-term projects like space exploration.
This space race's prize, the moon's south pole, where there's ice. That means water, air, and rocket fuel, critical to use the moon as a springboard to Mars. The U.S. plans to build a base there as part of its Artemis program. But China does too.
So, how will this cosmic tug-of-war between the U.S. and China play out in the years ahead? Given the immense strategic importance both nations place on their space programs and the existing political tensions, the battle for space supremacy is only going to heat up. It's like two top athletes pushing each other to their limits, each trying to outdo the other at every turn. Despite the rivalry, there's an undeniable need for cooperation. The U.S. and China must find a way to collaborate on some level when it comes to space exploration. But let's face it, With the current state of affairs, the idea of the Tiangong and ISS working together is a distant dream. The rivalry is too fierce and the wounds too fresh. China's space station, Tiangong, on the other hand, is becoming a beacon for countries without advanced space programs. It's a shiny new clubhouse that everyone wants to join. As China opens its doors to international collaboration, it's gaining allies and building a network of partners in space. Here's the truth. The world can only move forward and tackle its biggest challenges if we learn to work together. Picture a relay race where each runner has to pass the baton smoothly to the next. If one runner tries to run the whole race alone, they'll tire out before the finish line. So cooperation is key.
我们的比如说我们航天系统承担的登月服务的研制，我们完成了关键技术的攻关。我们对新一代的飞船，然后这个月面着陆器，还有月球车，所有这些跟人有关的这个工程设计，我们提出了医学和功效学的要求。
To highlight what happens when collaboration breaks down, consider the recent twist in the space rivalry. For years, China has been accused of pilfering American technology. But a new report from the South China Morning Post reveals a shocking turn. NASA astronauts have been accused of copying the design of a Chinese robot that has been exploring Mars for the past year. It's like a spy movie where the tables have turned and the supposed thief is now the victim. The lack of cooperation is weakening the U.S. space program. And while NASA struggles with political and funding hurdles, China is making significant strides. They've achieved breakthroughs with quantum satellites, hypersonic weapons, and have even landed spacecraft on the far side of the moon. These feats are driven by cutting-edge technology that the U.S. has yet to develop or deploy. In the grand scheme of things, the space race is about more than just national pride. It's about pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. If the US and China continue on their separate paths, they might both achieve great things. But imagine what they could accomplish together. A united effort could propel humanity to new heights, exploring the cosmos and solving problems here on Earth in ways we can only dream of.
Space is no longer science fiction. And if the United States does not maintain its lead, we are at risk of losing our national and economic security.
So, as we watch this space drama unfold, let's hope that someday cooperation will triumph over rivalry. After all, in the vast expanse of space, we are all just tiny specks on a small planet, and working together might be our best chance for a brighter future. Let us know if you believe this rivalry is good or bad for the world in the comments section below. And don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button. And to watch the latest geopolitical news, watch this video here.